you can be replaced by cheaper consumers from anywhere in the world who have lower demand. Well, these values that are being promoted as Canadian values, they aren't Canadian values, and they aren't Western values, and they're not British values, and they're not American values. They're internationalist, or if you like, globalist values. So that's the first thing to point out there, that this, if you like, this call to patriotism, this reflective attack on the so-called gangster in the United States, is an attempt to stir up a kind of national resentment in order to win an election based upon the celebration of values that are artificial and have been created by the international liberal system over 100 years ago, really. And that system was there to replace nations and to absorb them into a global system. And that's the point of those values. That's why they are celebrated internationally in all the former Western civilizations, as it were. It's the same everywhere. People say that you're a conspiracy theorist if you point that out, but it is remarkable, is it not, that in every country of the West, the same open border, LGBT, and net zero policies have been presented as the pinnacle values of Western civilization when they're anything but. In fact, when you pay for these values, you're effectively paying taxes to destroy your civilization. Now, these values are simply the make-believe attached to an economic system. And Mark Carney is a globalist technocrat, and he has been managing that economic system. That economic system sees nations as an inconvenience to a global marketplace, and it sees populations as fluid. Well, what this reduces to is that you can be replaced by cheaper consumers from anywhere in the world who have lower demands on their working conditions and wages, but who will also raise demands on things like housing, public services, and whose presence will actively destroy the social fabric of your nation. This is intentional because it creates a global network of global citizens without borders. So this is part of the plan. If you vote for Mr. Carney and his Liberals, that's what you're voting for. You're not voting for your nation. You're voting for it to be replaced by an international marketplace. You're voting to pay taxes to dissolve your national identity permanently. Now, given that this enormous shift from the Conservatives, who looked like they were getting a landslide well into the end of December, and now they seem to be trailing in the polls for about 7 points, perhaps, according to The Economist yesterday. Well, given that this has shifted so much, largely due to this resentment of Trump's remarks, it is possible that it will shift again before the 28th of April, when the election's supposed to be called, when people in Canada realise what they're actually going to be voting for is this international technocrat and his internationalist, non-Canadian set of values, which will actually dissolve what's left of the Canadian nation. Because most people, the chief concern for them in Canada before this was exactly counter-liberal issues such as mass migration, housing shortages, and the rising cost of living, which made life impossible for people. So it's impossible to raise a family because you can't afford anywhere to live. Now, these are real issues, instead of the fake patriotism that's being stirred up against the so-called gangster in the United States. And the last thing to say about that is that I investigated the Trump administration's claims of cross-border criminality in a crisis in Canada, and they turned out to be far worse than the allegations that were said to have prompted the tariffs, with the discovery of enormous, in fact, the biggest drug factories in the world, and $18 trillion that had been laundered through Canada's second national bank in the United States over 10 years for the Mexican and Chinese drug cartels. Canada is in a serious state. It is decidedly corrupt. This money has corrupted government, police, and banking officials as well. So the Americans' claims that Canada is approaching the status of a failed state do have a solid basis in reality. And I think that this fake jingoism is also concealing that hard truth from Canadians themselves. And they may find it out in the next few weeks, and they may not be so willing to vote for the architects of this disaster another time.
Aloha everyone, this is Jason Jones for LifeSite News. We hope you enjoyed this video. For more content like this, check the link in the description. You can also connect with us on social media to stay up to date with the latest news on life, faith, family, and freedom. Thanks for watching, and may God bless you.